To fully understand the origin of the problem, one must understand the history of the ecumenical patriarchate. The story begins with the first called apostle of Jesus Christ, St. Andrew. After the crucifixion of Christ, St. Andrew traveled to Byzantium and ordained the city's first bishop, St. Stachys, who served from 38 to 54 A.D. In 330 A.D., Roman Emperor Constantine transferred the capital of the Roman Empire to Byzantium and renamed it Constantinople, or the New Rome. Shortly before this, in 325 A.D., Emperor Constantine had convened the First Ecumenical Council, where the Nicene Creed was composed, the canon of the New Testament approved, and the governing framework of the Christian Church established. The Second Ecumenical Council of 381 and the Fourth Ecumenical Council of 451 in Chalcedon recognized the See of Constantinople as one of the original patriarchates. In the 600s, the Patriarch of Constantinople gained the title of First Among Equals and the title of Ecumenical Patriarch. This role continued on through the Great Schism of 1054, when the Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches formally split, and continues to exist today. For over 800 years, Constantinople had been the most important city in Europe. It was a cultural and economic crossroads and a center for piety and learning. But with the coming Crusades, the Byzantine Empire was made vulnerable to outside forces. On Tuesday, May 29, 1453, one of the darkest days in Christianity, Constantinople was captured by the Ottoman Turks, who entered Hagia Sophia and converted it into a mosque. Its beautiful icons were eventually covered with plaster, and other religious treasures were looted. This holy site was stripped of its Christian identity, defaced, and covered with Islamic symbols. This defacement and sacrilege continues today, as Hagia Sophia serves as a state-run museum that hosts trade shows and musical concerts for the profit of the Turkish government, which currently threatens the existence of the very institution for which this majestic church was built. With the creation of the modern secular Turkish state, it was thought that the treatment of Christians in Turkey would improve, but it has not. The ecumenical patriarch has been victimized by paranoid nationalism and racism that infects the Turkish government and compels it to violate the patriarchate's religious freedom by forcibly closing the theological school at Halki, interfering in the election of the ecumenical patriarch, failing to grant the ecumenical patriarchate legal status, and confiscating thousands of church properties without compensation. This mistreatment contradicts the very agreements which formed the modern Turkish Republic.
Turkey has very clear-cut obligations in relation to the patriarchate and also in relation to the Greek Orthodox community and other communities that it itself recognized as minority communities in the Lausanne Treaty of 1923. The Lausanne Treaty of 1923 was an international treaty that effectively gave recognition by all states of Turkey's boundaries and its new republic. But it was based upon an understanding that ancient Christian communities, and in particular the Patriarchate, and its ability to exist was fully recognized. So under that treaty there are clear-cut obligations on Turkey to observe religious freedom in relation to minorities and to allow minorities such as the Orthodox community to exercise freely its language, its culture, for its children to be educated in their own language, according to their own customs, at their own expense. All of that has not been recognized over the last 80 years. There's been decades of systematic repression which has left the Greek Orthodox community dwindling from about 180,000 to I think about 2,500. The Patriarchate is an ancient institution that for 1700 years has existed in Istanbul. It's like an eternal candle that, notwithstanding all the winds of change, continues to burn brightly, but it's now being starved of oxygen. And the reason why it's being starved of oxygen is not because of the winds of change, but because of a systematic policy of Turkish repression, which is slowly dwindling the oxygen around that candle, and it's now faltering. And if things aren't done sooner rather than later, irreparable harm and decline will affect not only the Patriarch but also the Greek Orthodox community.
The Halki Theological School was founded on the island of Halki, off the coast of Istanbul, in 1844. Until its forcible closure in 1971 by the Turkish government, Halki served as the primary theological school for the Ecumenical Patriarchate, accommodating between 80 and 120 seminarians and theologians at any one time.
Halki. This was a seminary started in the 1800s next to a monastery that St. Photius, and at that time was the Ecumenical Patriarch, began in the 8th or 9th century. So this is a tradition, a religious tradition that has gone on that island where the seminary is for centuries. And yet, in 1971, Ankara decreed that it was an illegal institution and had to be closed immediately. And it was forcibly closed. The school was forcibly shut down. As a result, the Ecumenical Patriarchate does not have an institution, a local institution, to train its clergy.
When one compares that treatment to perhaps the treatment of Muslims, who, as I understand it, are allowed to practice their religion in the sense that there are religious schools, there's much greater freedom for, if you like, the majority religions in Turkey.
It's a point regarding the legal personality and property rights that all the institutions, the international institutions, have recognized, have pointed out to Turkey as a gross violation of religious freedom, whether it's the United Nations Rapporteur on Human Rights, whether it's the European Union, whether it's the United States government. All these bodies have told Turkey in no uncertain terms, this must stop. The religious persecution must stop. You need to let the non-Muslim minorities in Turkey live with the same freedoms and rights as the Muslims.
Since the school's closure in 1971, the Ecumenical Patriarchate has not been able to train its clergy and has had to send candidates abroad for training. This has proven to be expensive, and few priests return to Turkey to minister for the Mother Church. Today, on Turkish soil, the Ecumenical Patriarchate is served by only 15 bishops, 2 priests, and 2 deacons. In 1923, the governor of Istanbul issued a scrawny 51-word edict that forever changed the Ecumenical Patriarchate. It required that the Holy Synod of Bishops, the body who elects the Ecumenical Patriarch, and the patriarchal candidates themselves be Turkish citizens. In 1970, a second, slightly longer edict was issued by the governor of Istanbul concerning the Ecumenical Patriarch's election. It built upon the 1923 edict and increased government interference in the election by requiring that the Holy Synod submit a list of 3 candidates to the governor of Istanbul, who could then remove names from the list, as well as install his own patriarch if any restrictions were not followed by the synod.
It seems to me that this constitutes a fundamental interference in the very essence of what the patriarch is about, an ecumenical patriarch which ministers not simply to people within the community in Istanbul and in Turkey, but across the seas, in Australia, in New Zealand, in America, and even further afield from that. All of those particular areas have an interest in the ecumenical status of the Patriarchate and in the elections to the Patriarchate. And so it's of critical importance, not only to the Patriarch, but to all those other related institutions, that they be allowed to vote for the next Patriarchate without interference from Turkey.
For example, if the Holy Synod wishes to vote on Archbishop Demetrius of America, or other metropolitans in the United States, or France, or Europe, or Australia, they should be allowed to do so. But the Turkish government says, no, you're not allowed to do that. You could only vote on a Turkish citizen to be ecumenical patriarch. And not only that, we can wipe out any name that you submit to us to vote on. So in essence, they are interfering in the canonical structure and order of the church by telling us who we can vote on and who we can't vote on. We are gravely concerned that our brilliant spiritual father, and we wish him decades more of spiritual service to our beloved church, but when the good Lord beckons him, who will fill that void? Will we be given instructions by the government of Turkey who is qualified to be the ecumenical patriarch?
We are very few now in Constantinople, 2,000 people, less or more, and we are 16 bishops, 15 bishops. More of us are aged, and we must to find a solution if we want to continue the life of the Patriarchate here, from here to all the Orthodox world.
The election of the next patriarch is absolutely critical to the survival of the Patriarchate and its ecumenical status. At the moment, there are only possibly 15 other people who would be eligible under Turkish restrictions were the patriarch to die tomorrow. The position is that many of those who are eligible are over 60. There's only one or two who are below that age, and in order to have a proper, free and open election, it is absolutely necessary that the selection should include those from the ecumenical areas of the Patriarch beyond Turkey, so that foreign bishops should be allowed to stand and should be allowed to vote. This is of absolute critical importance to the future of the Patriarchate. Without expanding the gene pool, without expanding the electorate and those that can stand for election, there is a great possibility that the Patriarch will be subject to irreversible decline and would have to choose out of a very small number, and by the next generation that flame will have completely extinguished. So it's now or never. It has to be confronted, it has to be dealt with. Turkey's unlawful interference literally has to stop now.
The Ecumenical Patriarchate is a 2,000-year-old church founded by St. Andrew, the first called apostle of Jesus. Yet quite amazingly, the Turkish state says that the Ecumenical Patriarchate does not exist.
The Turkish government does not recognize the Ecumenical Patriarchate as a legal entity. In fact, the very land that its headquarters is based in the Fener district of Istanbul is not owned by the Patriarchate.
Now, the reason why the lack of status occurred was because the Patriarchate is ecumenical in nature, and that is central to its belief and practice, but the Turkish state denied that status as a consequence of its republican and secular policies, in which it rejected really any homeland for anyone other than a Turk. And so it ascribed a national religious status to the Patriarchate, which effectively denuded it of any legal personality. That religious status cannot be accepted by the Patriarchate, and as a result of that, there's been no application to fully confirm its status one way or the other. And since the Turkish state deprives the Patriarchate of its true identity, it's been unable to enforce any property rights, precisely because the state does not ascribe it a legal personality. It goes to the heart of all the claims, because as a result of not having legal personality, it can't own property. It then can't actually manage some of its pious institutions, which have been transferred to the Directorate of Foundations run by Turks, And it also means at the end of the day that it can't repair its own buildings, which are in a perilous state of decay at the moment. So it has a fundamental effect on all the related claims of the Patriarchate, and it goes to the very source of conflict between Turkey and Christian communities.
After 1933, the Turkish government created so-called Directorate for Foundations and asked from our minority to give lists of the property of each parish. The Patriarchate and our minority didn't accept, but was obliged to give these lists for recognizing as parishes to have legal status in the Turkey. And at that time, Turkey gave legal status with lists to our parishes, monasteries, etc., foundations, orphanage, hospitals, but didn't give legal status to the Patriarchate. The Patriarchate has, until now, no legal status in Turkey. Gave this list, and Turkey, Directorate for Foundations, obliged to register these properties in the names of our parishes, but didn't know. Left the ownership of this property the most free. And after that, same time, municipalities, Directorate, State took without any reason these properties. For example, the school of our parish in Orthodox, in Bosphorus, is in the side, in the seaside, one school, a big building. They took from us for another reason, and now they're making hotel.
What has been especially disappointing and frustrating to us is that as Turkey continues its negotiations to accede into the European Union, the property confiscations you would think would decelerate, but in fact have accelerated. In 1936, when the foundation law in Turkey, and this is a law that rules all the charitable institutions and foundations and churches, was developed, the Church, the Ecumenical Patriarchate, registered some 8,000 properties that it held. In 1999, the number of properties the Church had numbered only 2,500. And from 1999 to 2006, the Church has now less than 500. In other words, over 75% of the properties have been lost since 1999. And this is the same period of time where, on the one hand, Turkey is negotiating what ought to be in good faith regarding accession to the European Union and adopting Western ideals and shared values. And on the other hand, they are confiscating as many properties as possible. That's not showing good faith. There's no progress, and that's why we're forced to make our trips to Ankara, Washington, the European Union, and now forming a legal committee regarding bringing Turkey, the government of Turkey, to the European Court of Human Rights to account for what they have done. When properties are confiscated, oftentimes they are